Hey everyone, so today what I've been doing is I'm gonna be reacting to a few videos of an animation channel which is clearly not legit. I mean, totally legit, like subscribe, blah blah blah, usual. Let's react, shall we? Nice intro.
Hi there, I'm Aria. Imagine yourself
Hi Aria.
not being able to say, I'm hungry, I'm hurting, thank you, I love you. Imagine yourself being imprisoned inside a body which doesn't obey your orders at all. People are all around you, yet you feel alone. It wouldn't be easy, would it? Well, I lived for years feeling this way. Years of wishing for the ability to connect, to express, to share with others. Maybe you're wondering about the reason? Well, it was that I fell off the tree. I was my mom and dad's only child. We were a middle-class family, and we lived in a small house with a stunning backyard, which had an old oak tree that was said to be even older than my grandparents. When my dad first bought the house, he found a tree house in the oak tree built by the kids who had lived in the house before us. After a lot of convincing, my father agreed to fix the tree house. He even made a wooden ladder so I could climb into the tree easily. I remember helping my dad decorate its walls with posters and photos of my favorite band. For a second, you might be thinking, what a sweet family. But no, this wasn't the case exactly. You see, my mom was a moody woman who yelled a lot, and nothing me or my dad did could please her. She would spend the whole night smoking cigarettes in front of the TV and then sleep the whole day.
Why? Why? I know this isn't real, but like, well, it probably isn't, but like, get rid of that woman. Just like, say, be gone, and then just yeet her. Not literally yeet, because you'd get arrested for that, but metaphorically yeet.
As for my dad, he spent his time working so he could pay the bills and buy us food. And me, well, after I got home from school, there was nothing for me to do but go and play with my dolls in the treehouse. For my 13th birthday, my dad bought me the best gift ever. He bought me a little white puppy that was super fluffy. I called him Snowball. Perhaps this dog would keep me company so I wouldn't be so alone. I loved Snowball, and I taught him lots of tricks. We used to spend all day together in the treehouse. We would only go home to eat dinner. That way, we steered clear of my mom's yelling and her long fights with my go home to eat dinner. That way,
man, that dog's face is like, I'm sick of this woman. I'ma claw her. Like, that's what that face says right there. That is the face of a dog who wants to kill. Not really, but this is complicated. Like, the mum shouldn't even exist in that family. Like, the dog is just a complete savage and like knows exactly what's going on. Like,
we steered clear of my mom's yelling and her long fights with my dad. I watched.
See? Cracks of anger. This is anger. Why would, like, the dad not just yeet her out? Like, she's not doing anything to benefit the family. She doesn't even care about the family. She probably only cares about, like, a free place to stay. Like, those people disgust me. They should be, like, be gone. Yeah.
To Sky a lot during my days in the treehouse. Back then, my dad only came home after the sun had set, so I'd watch the stars lighting up the sky. They looked amazing. I knew that those stars were nothing but meteors traveling fast through the sky as they burned, but everything my dad told me about them made them seem magical. One time, I was watching the sky with Snowball, waiting for my dad to return home. When he arrived, he climbed up and sat beside me. He said, "This falling star is a wish that just came true for someone out there in the world." "A wish?" I said. He explained, a long, long time ago, there was a poor man praying to the gods every day. However, the gods were always busy, so they didn't answer him. One day, he screamed so loudly the mountains shook. The gods looked at him and listened to his troubles. They became so sad and cried burning stars. So this way, whenever he saw a falling star in the sky, he'd make a wish and the gods would make them come true. "But can this be possible?" I asked. And he replied, "Legends are a beautiful thing to hear, but not to believe. If the legends are so old, how can..."
Man, this dad has got it. This dad is the best. Like, the mom can, like, just be gone. Like, shoo. You don't belong here, be gone.
We know if they are true or not,
But, like,
I asked. He
dad.
just smiled at me and said it was time to head back into the house. On that same night, while I was lying in bed hugging...
Oh, why'd you have to ruin it with an ad? Come on. Oh, coffee. Nice.
Misinephrine provides up to 8 hours pain relief in a
I said
single
coffee
tablet.
was okay. Well,
Misinephrine.
coffee is okay.
Snowball, it
Coffee.
started to feel like my life was falling apart. My mom was screaming hysterically at my dad, telling him that the money he was bringing in was no longer enough and that he should start searching for an extra job. She said that she could no longer go out with her friends because she was so embarrassed. She couldn't afford to buy new dresses every time they went out like her friends did. I saw Snowball looking at me as if he wanted to say, "What a silly woman."
This dog has got it. This dog is bigger brain than that mother. Like, seriously.
Fighting and loud screaming continued for a long time until I could no longer bear it. I snuck out of the window and headed towards the dark oak tree in the backyard. Everything around me was dark. Behind me walked Snowball. We crept very quietly so no one would hear us, and then we arrived
Wait. How'd the dog get in the tree? Never
at
mind.
the
Never mind.
treehouse. It was pitch black, so I missed a step on the ladder, and then my leg slipped. The last thing I remembered from that day was that after I fell hard on the ground, everything around me turned fuzzy. Snowball sounded far away even though I could see him jumping around me. Then I wasn't able to feel anything. After a little while, I felt myself waking up. My head hurt and I couldn't feel any part of my body. I'd completely lost control over my body parts. Even my eyes, I couldn't open them. I could feel the light around me, but it was too difficult to open my eyes. Oh my, what happened to me?
Just
Was
go
I
Super
stuck in
Saiyan,
my sleep,
like-
or was it worse than that? Had I died? I didn't know much about death, except that after death, a person drowns in darkness. But this darkness I felt was different, completely different. I could feel my body freezing. Suddenly I heard someone. If I was able to hear him, that means I wasn't dead. Thank God. From his tone of voice, I gathered he was a doctor speaking to my parents. He said, "The damage she suffered to her head due to the fall has resulted in severe internal bleeding in her brain, which is preventing enough oxygen from reaching her body, resulting in a coma." But I wasn't in a coma. I was there, with them. I heard my dad crying and my mom inquiring about the treatment fees. I wanted to scream, to call out for them, to say something, anything. But I wasn't able to even talk at that time. Suddenly, I was just a vegetable, unable to do anything but listen.
Why a vegetable? That's a really random example. I'm overthinking it, aren't I? Whatever.
Most people don't think twice before talking or connecting with others. They do it automatically. But I had absolutely no way of speaking to anyone. For the last 13 years, I had been a normal girl. A girl who loved her dad, her dog, and who loved to play. I was happy and healthy.
What I really loved about that is that she didn't include the mum. I love my dad, I love my dog, and I love to play. Where's the mum? Nowhere, because she's a PO. I shouldn't say that.
But now, suddenly, that had all changed. The doctors didn't know what to do. They thought I was completely in a coma, but they always treated me nicely. All the time I spent in the hospital, I only heard my dad's voice. My mom had completely vanished. I didn't know where she was,
Good.
and I didn't hear anything related to her. Until the day the doctor said there is nothing more they can do, and that it is best for me to return to my parents' home. I heard my mom arguing with my dad. She didn't want me back home. I was, according to her, a burden that she didn't want to carry. But I went home anyway. I was happy because I was returning home. I heard my dad telling my mom that he finished the treehouse because that was the last thing I asked him to do. That's why he insisted on bringing me back home, so I could be near the things I loved. However, things went downhill from there. I lost my ability to move. I failed all the mind exams they conducted on me in the hospital, so the doctors told my parents they could treat me as if I didn't exist. My return home was just a hopeless attempt at keeping my unconscious body comfortable until I died. My dad tried his hardest to keep me comfortable, and that really annoyed my mom. Their friends stopped visiting after a while, and the money Dad was providing was no longer enough. Machines that were keeping me alive were too expensive. Before, I was able to escape my mom screaming and ranting, but today I was stuck with it without them even knowing that I could hear them. The whole thing felt like a nightmare. When my dad first got me Snowball, I thought that he was very smart and could just understand me without even having to talk to him. But my dad used to laugh and say, dogs are about as smart as a 3-year-old. They can feel when you're happy, sad, or scared, but they can't read your mind. Deep down, though, I knew Snowball was no ordinary dog. He was special enough to be able to read my thoughts because we had this insane bond. Every time my parents started their screaming matches, I'd hear Snowball
Like, the dog wouldn't be able to read, like, the person's mind. Okay? I'll explain how. I don't know how exactly to explain, but I've got a pretty good rough idea. So since they've spent so much time together, they've got a really, really strong bond. So they started bonding as soon as the dad got Snowball, okay? So then, like, he would have been, like, super young. Neural network completely gone, except for, like, breathing and learning how to wag his tail. And walking a little bit. So, like, she basically would have been a mother to him. And then, think of him as, like, a duplicate. Like, Snowball is like a dupe of that kid. Well, artificial kid. Whatever. So, he's a dupe, is what I'm trying to say. He's, like, God has just gone Control-C, Control-V. Bam. I didn't do that very well. Whatever.
sitting beside me and barking in a low voice, as if to tell me that everything would be all right. I was sure that Snowball knew I was a prisoner in my body, unlike what everyone else believed. He never left my side. His breathing was my only comfort. For a while, I used to be entertained by my father when he entered my room at night and started moving my body left and right to help my blood circulate. Once he was done, he'd sit beside me and talk with me for an hour or so about his day, like he used to before. But that didn't last for long. The last talk he had with me was about how tired he was, both physically and mentally, that he was very upset he'd lost his little girl, the only person in the whole world who used to listen to him. That day, I heard him sobbing so loudly. Then he suddenly said, "I can no longer bear to look at you like this anymore." After that, he stopped talking to me altogether. A year quickly turned into 2, and I felt the person I used to be disappearing. Not just her body, but also her memories. My mom said that she'd had enough with my stuff taking up so much room, and that she could put the space to good use. My dad wasn't able to refuse, so he just said that he'd move my things to the treehouse. It wasn't long until I was moved out of my room to another one that was more practical and way smaller. It had barely enough room for my bed, machines, and for one person to be able to move around in. That was enough for me, according to my mom. What was worse was that this little room
Screw the
was
mom.
next to the living room. That meant that I
Mom.
could hear
Mom.
everything. I mean, literally down to the tiniest details. 2 years turned to 3, and I was still in the same place with no one aware of my existence. It was like I was a ghost. Whenever my mom's friends came to visit, they used to
No! Why? Okay, no, this ad's actually really good. I like this ad. It gives me a warm feeling inside.
3 wishes, Charlie. Oh.
But Charlie, you can't eat chocolate.
Oh, he knows.
See?
Tim Tam, what more could you wish for?
The
to
bond.
ignore me, as if I was just part of the furniture. I was dead to everyone, just not in the ground. Only Snowball remained at my side. My mom and her friends' conversations were ridiculous. They gossiped a lot and couldn't stop judging their relatives. Sometimes they talked about clothes, travel, and their husbands. I once heard my mom talking ill about my dad. She said he was the reason behind her unhappiness and that she had met some rich guy at a coffee shop. That guy had invited her for a drink and she'd gone to meet him. And now she was seriously considering leaving me and my dad. For me, that was the worst part about those 3 years. Feeling totally powerless and not being able to stand in front of her and not being able to scream, "You're an ungrateful woman." All the things
I would have said something else other than woman, beginning with B. I'll let you guys figure it out in your head.
Dad did for you, and yet it's never enough. Now you want to leave him because some other guy has more money? My poor dad didn't deserve my mom, or even me. I found myself in utter darkness, and the darkness was swallowing my dad up whole. I couldn't remember much about my life before the fall. I was so terrified I'd forget everything. I remembered having a friend called Maisie, but I couldn't remember what we used to do or how we would spend time together. I remember loving science, but I no longer remembered any of the stuff that we'd learned at school. At the same time, my mind clung onto those memories, and at the same time, it started creating new ones that hadn't existed before. I had to find a way to stay here, in this world, even if I had to create my own world inside my head. Maisie became my best friend. She always visited on Sundays.
Yes. Alright. Let's go. I'm good. We've already done that.
It was pitch black, so I missed a step on the ladder, and then my leg slipped. The damage she suffered to her head due to the fall has resulted in severe internal bleeding in her brain, resulting in a coma. But I wasn't in a coma. That meant that I could hear everything. A year quickly turned into 2, and I felt the person I used to be disappearing. I had to find a way to stay here, in this world. I remember loving science, but I no longer remembered any of the stuff that we'd learned at school. At the same time, my mind clung onto those memories, and at the same time, it started creating new ones that hadn't existed before. I had to find a way to stay here, in this world, even if I had to create my own world inside my head. Maisie became my best friend. She always visited on Sundays. Every time she came, she talked about her classmates, how Sophie had fallen in love with Joe, and how Kit had failed the math test, so the teacher had punished him by making him solve 10 equations in front of the whole class. Maisie's visits, though they were only in my head, were the best parts of my day. I didn't know that what I was doing in order to entertain myself was actually a kind of exercise for my damaged mind.
Oh, hell yeah. And that's how
If you
you get
write
a
anything
buff
on your
brain.
computer, you need to get Grammarly.
Big
I write
brain.
pretty much all day, every day, and
Goodbye.
I
love
didn't
you, Grammarly.
realize that I was helping myself get better. If I'd known, I wouldn't have waited 3 years to start doing it. My consciousness was slowly returning. You might wonder, how did I realize that? Well, simply, I felt my eyelids flutter whenever Maisie visited me. Believe it or not, our thoughts have incredible power. But even so, no one knew that I was coming out of a coma. Ever since I'd first been diagnosed as being in a coma, I was totally aware of everything happening around me, exactly like a normal person. But I was stuck inside a silent body, it seemed, a mind full of life that no one noticed. I started accepting this cruel fate and got lost in my made-up thoughts. Suddenly, I could no longer tell the difference between what was real and what wasn't. There's a fine line that separates memory from imagination, and I'd clearly overstepped it. But the one thing I was absolutely certain of was that the fights my parents had and my mom's betrayal were 100% real. After 4 years, my mom had had enough of me. How long must I endure moving this body left and right without any response? She would yell in my dad's face, and he would answer, until she dies. Imagine being in my position, not being able to speak to a friend, not feeling loved anymore, not having any ambitions or dreams, no hope of being able to look forward to anything. All my thoughts were miserable ones. I lived in fear, and if I was being honest, I was waiting for death so I could escape from all of this. I pictured myself dying in some nursing home, cold and alone. And so that's how I spent those 4 long years. Snowball's existence was my only comfort. My eyelids started fluttering a lot. You might think that's not really a big deal. Anyone can do that without trying, but that wasn't the case with me. Snowball noticed what was going on and started to bark for hours and hours without stopping. My mom couldn't tolerate it. My dad came home and Snowball continued to bark. Everyone went to bed and Snowball was still barking. He was just like me, wishing for someone to realize that I was still with them. But what happened was the opposite of what we hoped for. The next day, his barking stopped completely. I didn't know what had happened to him. Mom must have gotten rid of him. I was really worried about him. Snowball was my only friend, the only one that made me feel that I wasn't actually dead. He disappeared. That day, I heard some heated discussion between my parents. You might say that nothing was new, but this time it was different. My mom decided to leave my dad. She accused him of having never been the perfect husband. She was crazy. He was the coolest dad a girl could ever wish for. He tried to persuade her to stay, but it was pointless. She screamed at the top of her voice, "It would have been better if she died that day. It's like a curse that won't go away unless I leave." The sound of the door slamming was the last thing I heard that day. I was incapable of changing any of the things around me or even the way my mom and dad looked at me.
Oh,
I was an
no, that
invisible
hurts.
silent watcher to how people acted when they thought no one was looking. Unfortunately, I wasn't just a watcher. Because of my inability to communicate with people, I became the perfect victim. A creature that looked like it was devoid of emotions. For 4 years, my mom used to abuse me mentally and physically. What did I ever do to her to deserve that? A part of me wanted to cry, and the other part wanted to fight. I was so full of
Fight.
pain and
Just
sadness.
like,
It was torture. The following day, it was
full on like hook. Just like left hook that. Just go like kaboom. Square in the face. That solves all your problems real quick. Get some blood on your hands. With that, if there's ever that bad of a person and you've tolerated for like years, like this story says, then just like nobody's gonna judge you for what you're gonna do. Like that's all I'm saying.
Nick Minute.
like I no longer existed inside the house. My dad was really depressed. He moved me to a nursing home, exactly like I'd expected would happen. I felt worthless now without Snowball, and without people around me. I became even more of a shell of my former self. Another year went by and everyone still thought I was in a deep coma. In the nursing house, everything was so quiet. No voices, no movements, and no talking. Just a stranger who moved me left and right every day and who made sure that my machines were working normally. The 6-year mark came and went, and then the 7th, and everything was the same. I used to figure out that the time from the nurses changing shifts every 6 hours. That meant that on the 4th time I was moved, a day would have passed.
Oh, we've already seen this one, so like.
Fancy a new flavour this refill?
Oh, no, we haven't.
Murray River salted caramel.
New Tim Tam Crafted collection. What
Oh,
more
that
could
dog.
you wish
That dog
for?
knows what's up.
No one visited me during the 3 years that I spent there except my friend Maisie. No one cared about me but her. I lived in terror. I knew every day would be exactly the same as the last one, over and over again. I totally lost any hope I had of hearing another person's voice. But then one night, my dad decided to visit me. I had no idea what date it was because I'd lost all sense of time. But it happened to be my 20th birthday. He held my hand and I couldn't believe it when I heard his voice. It felt like a dream. He told me, "You won't be alone anymore. I'll be with you forever from now on. I can't believe you just turned 20. Emotions welled up in me and suddenly I could feel the familiar fluttering of my eyelids. I had to open my eyes. I couldn't stay like this anymore. My dad had his face buried in my shoulder and he was crying. He couldn't see my face or my eyes, but when he turned his head, he jumped and ran outside screaming at the top of his voice, "Doctor, I need a doctor!" Perhaps emotions have more power than we realize. My dad's love
That's
for
a
me
good
made me
message.
open my eyes once again. The doctors ran some tests on me and none of them could explain what had happened. They only said the damage that her head suffered was apparently able to heal with time. Your daughter is out of her coma. To make sure I was able to hear them, the doctor asked me to blink twice. And I did it! Being able to communicate again, even in a simple way, felt like the best thing in the world. But even more than that was the fact that I was no longer a nobody. Dad was so excited. He didn't even know where to begin. But my movement and reactions were still limited. It would take time. There were seriously times where I almost gave up, but I had to hold on to this. My dad promised never to leave me alone, and he kept his word. At night, my dad moved my bed towards the window. It was the first time I'd seen the sky for the last 7 years. At that moment, a star fell from the sky. I closed my eyes and wished to be able to speak again. I mean, there must have been a reason for the star to fall at that moment, right? It couldn't have been a coincidence. That night, my dad told me about that dark day. He told me how Snowball ran home barking nonstop. My mom tried to shut him up and to kick him out, but he refused. He bit my dad's pants and kept pushing until my dad came with him outside. From afar, he saw me motionless on the ground. He panicked and drove me to the hospital in a hurry. There, they told him that there was no hope. But my dad wouldn't give up. He knew there would come a day where I'd be okay again. He must have gotten sick of waiting for that day. It's true that I was happy for recovering gradually, but even then I didn't feel completely free. People around me were still controlling everything. When and what I ate, if I could stay in bed, or if I should be sitting on a chair. It didn't matter how many times I'd blinked, I couldn't say anything except for yes and no. One day, my dad came in all happy. He told me that the doctors had finally agreed to let him take me on a wheelchair around the city. It was the first time in so long that I get to move and finally leave my bed. I was scared. The outside world must have changed a lot. I didn't know if I should go, but I needed this. It was time to get back out there. I remember one moment from that day
Knock that
very
mum out.
vividly. My dad left me alone in the car on our way back in order to buy something quickly from the store. A woman passed by, looked at me, and smiled. I didn't know the reason behind her smile back then, and I'll never know. But that small smile, a small human interaction, made me feel better again. That woman's smile is what pushed me to continue. Seeing my dad come into my room was always the best moment of my day. However, I wasn't pleased when my dad entered my room with the press who came to listen to my story. Apparently, they decided that my story was worth being told and shared. The press ruined my peace and quiet. My mom even returned just so she could be in the spotlight. She returned after disappearing for so long, just for fame. The press did help a bit though. My dad had them help us look for solutions and treatments that might help me get better. My mom, though, well, she didn't exactly show up because she suddenly remembered the importance of family. She was just there for fame, and Dad wanted me to decide if she could stay or not. Mom's answer was, "My dear daughter, do you want your mommy back in your life?" I blinked nonstop, and this meant I wanted her to go, because I knew she didn't care if I lived or died. My dad was a person who'd taken care of me my whole life. Of course he had weak moments where he wasn't by my side, but at least he still loved me enough and thought of me all the time. And for me, that was enough. And guess what? My dad got in contact with one of the big companies that made medical devices. They had created a device that gets implanted inside the brain and is connected to a special computer. The device sends electric waves to the computer that then says the words out loud. That company heard about my condition in the media and were happy to help me. The first time they tried this on me was pretty funny. Everything I said made everyone laugh, but for me it was sad because I never got an answer to my question. What I asked was, what happened to my dog Snowball? My story might be sad. Some of you might believe it, and others will say that it is just a product of my imagination. But what can't be denied is that there are a lot of people like me in this world who no one knows anything about because they don't have the ability to connect with people. It wouldn't hurt to act nicely towards them and not to ignore them, because like me, they have feelings too. My suffering lasted for 7 years, but I truly believe that the star that fell that night was the reason my wish of being able to talk again came true. Everything happens for a reason. Did you like my story? Don't forget to tell me what you think in the comments below, and to like and subscribe to the channel.
That's creepy. It's very creepy. Do that. Yeah. Do whatever she said, blah blah blah. That'll end it for this video. Goodbye, people.